Kumlen and Ablak Gemara. The Gemara for Shabbos is Daf Tes. We're up to the Gemara, about 6 lines from the top of the page. Rav Huna says, Oy Kesef, Oy Meitiv. You have a choice to pay money, or if you pay land, you have to pay for the best. Rashi says that the Gemara is going back to this subject we had a few days ago, that we had one pasuk where it says Meitav, the best, and the other pasuk where it says Kesef Yoshev Lebailov. You give money and not fill a subin. So how do you reconcile the two psukim? So the Torah is saying you have a choice. You can either pay money or you pay the best of the fields. Now, why you wait until here? Because first we wanted to complete the discussion of Bishmol and Rabbi Akiva about whose EDS do you pay, from the mazik, from best quality fields, from the perpetrator of the crime or from the victim, and then we go back to this discussion. That's how Rashi learns. Taisa doesn't like this pshat, but nevertheless, that's how Rashi learns. Says the Gemara, I have a question. Rav Nachman asked Rav Huna a question. It says in Pasuk Yoshi Rabbis Shavei Kesef Afil Subin. It says clearly that you either give money or you said you money or property. Here it says clearly even Subin, brand. Says you want to have my skin, Leslie, you have no money. If you have the money, then you can give brand. Says the money, Leslie, if you don't have money, pshita, then obviously you can give brand. No. I would have thought, I'm being like, we would tell the guy, Zil Tarach, it's your problem. You go and bother, Zovin, sell your brand and convert it into money. But I isolate cats, bring in money. Kamash Balan, that if you have money, you give money or property. If you don't have, then you can give brand as well. That's what it comes to teach you. And that's what the main Tam rules, that the rule is by Nazikin, that you give either money or you give makeup. It's only if you don't have, then you give something. When it comes to Baal Chai, there's a big machlek is a shaynim. By Baal Chai, what can the borrower, can the lender say, I want to get paid money? Or can you have a choice? Kesef and makeup. So many Rishonim hold that since by a borrower he lent you money, then you have to give him back something which is close as possible to money, and therefore you're either paying money or you can say pay me metalplin, which can be converted into money. Like we learned a few days ago, the Zion Bay is a lot quicker than other assets can. Says the Gemara further. A new statement. Money has the same laws as property. What exactly does it mean? Says the Gemara, what exactly does it mean? Is he saying that you have a choice? You can either pay money or property. Isn't that identical to what Rabbi Huna is saying? It's exactly what Rabbi Huna said. So all he should have said is Ella, this is the case. Two brothers, that divided an estate, but they said like this: one of them takes property, and another one takes, a contract to property. He takes money. One guy took property, one guy took money. Came along the lender, and he seized the land. So the question is, what does the person who got the money, does he have to be involved at all or not? So the person who ended up losing the entire property goes to the brother and says, look, the entire estate is encumbered through the debts, and therefore you have to give me half of the money that you got. So isn't that obvious? High bro, high labra, but only one guy has to shoulder the obligation of his father, not the other one. They're both not sons. That's one way of asking. Or either, other ask exactly the opposite. The contrary. Normally they say, why should he participate at all? Why should the guy the money have to pay? He can argue the reason why I took money is that I take full responsibility. If I lose it or it's stolen, I cannot come back to you for compensation. And the same thing about you. If you ended up with property and somebody ends up seizing it, it's your problem. So why should I contribute at all? I don't have to pay you. And therefore you took land, if somebody sees it from you, you have no right to come back to me. Ellis, what's the case? Two brothers, not that you took money and I took the land. Brothers, they divided the land. You took X and I took Y. And then what happened was the Bal Chayv lender came, the Notel Chelke Shel Echelmen, and took one of the brothers' land. And therefore, Rab Asi says that what happens is you go back and you divide the other land. Says the Gemara, or he says that what money is like property, and And the other, whoever ends up giving the property, the other one has to compensate him half. And what's the chiddush is? So the chiddush is that the other brother who has to give the brother who lost the property half has a choice. I can either compensate you with half of my land, or I can compensate you with giving you money. But how much, he doesn't say exactly how much to give. It just says money or land. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. We already discussed this once before, or when we learned. Two brothers divided the land. Came along a lender, and sees them in the land of one of them. He sees one of them fields. So they have three opinions. Rav says that the division is annulled, and therefore they have to start all over again, and therefore the remaining property is divided amongst the two brothers. That's what he holds. And Shmuel says he lost out. Whoever lost out, too bad. You tough luck. And Rabashi says, you know what? Rabashi says that the brother takes, he has to give him a quarter in land or a quarter in money. No, he doesn't give him half of his land, he gives half of that, only a quarter. As if Rabashi is not sure whether he has anything at all. Not, you don't want to make a compromise, pay half of what you have to give, so a quarter. What's the story? What's the argument here? So Gemara says, Rav said, we have an argument, I think, called two brothers divide an estate. This is how Rashi learns, other Shem are different. But Rashi says, two brothers divide an estate. So the question is, if we say yesh bereda or ein bereda, do we say that if you divide a estate, then probably the half that you received is always yours, and the half the other brothers always is? That's one way of looking at it. Other way of looking at it is kilkuchadami. We don't know if you ended up with your side of the property. Maybe you ended up with your brothers, as if you came to an arrangement. You know what? Doesn't matter. We'll contrary each other. I'm buying it. This property I'm buying, and you're buying that part. And a step further is if lukuchas, but lukuchas without any guarantee. So if I lose my half, too bad on me. If you lose your half, too bad on you. It's lukuchas below achrayis. So now the Gemara explains. Rav says, "Botla machlek is the whole division falls apart." Somebody he holds achim shecholku, brother that divided the field is kiyoshim havi, like heirs, and therefore they're both like heirs. They both have an obligation to pay off a father's debt, and therefore, if somebody takes one field is lost, the other one has to shoulder as well. We both equally are indebted or equally responsible to pay or obligated to pay that debt off. Shmuel says, Vita, he holds you too bad. He holds that what? They're like lekuchas dummy, which means that not both of them are obligated to have a debt. Whatever property I had, we divide, and I owe you nothing. And therefore, since it's a suffix it's a suffix, whether it's we'll see in a minute. So sorry. So as if there's no guarantee. And because there's no guarantee, so therefore you lost your property, I don't have to reimburse you. And because we are like lekuchas, it's not like we're yoshim that I have an obligation to pay off, because we're lekuchas, we're strangers who just bought into the property. Ravasi says, I am not sure. I am not sure if they're like yoshim or like lekuchas. Therefore, you only have to give, perhaps we're yoshim, and therefore I have to give you half my property. Perhaps for lekuchas, I have to give you nothing. And therefore, I'll give you half of what I have to give you, a quarter, either in land or in money. I'm not sure. I'm not sure which one it is. And therefore, I give you a quarter either in land or I give it to you in money. And another way of learning is we're not sure, faces, we're not sure if it's like lukuchas with guarantee or lukuchas without a guarantee. Another pshat is Rashi brings is that I have to give you a quarter in land and a quarter in money. So I have to give you the full half, but a part of it in money and part of it in land. If we're like Yoshim, then you have to redivide the whole thing, and therefore you get land. And I cannot give you money in its place because we have to recalibrate. But if we're like purchasers and I am responsible, I can pay you out with money. Says the Gemara. So what do you mean that money is like land? In this case, money is like land regarding meitav, which is what we said before. You can either pay with money or pay with land. You're right. He says exactly the same thing. Now that we mentioned Rab Zeda, we say another din of Rab Zeda, which is totally unrelated. Amar Rab Zeda, Amar Rab Huna, the mitzvah ad shlish. He makes a cryptic statement. By mitzvah, you should pay up to a third. My shlish, what do you mean a third? What are you talking about? Elaim shlish, basically a third of what you own. Elmata, if so, Isrami le klosa mitzvah. So you have to do 3 mitzvahs. Lace of lekula besa. You got to pay out, and basically you become bankrupt. You'll have nothing left at all. How can that be? Taste already says it seems clear that you don't. So how much do you actually have to pay for a mitzvah? So Taste introduces the idea that even if it's a passing mitzvah, and nevertheless you're not mechuyev to give a third of what you own to fulfill this mitzvah, and he quotes, by tzedakah we say don't give more than a fifth, and therefore some people hold that by mitzvah also, mitzvah say you don't have to give more than a fifth of your money. Others say that even less than that. In fact, there's a Mishnah Berurah in Tafel Yudvav, Allah talks about, if you can't afford a mitzvah, you actually mechuyev to go. And other Rishonim say you're not mechuyev at all. Only when it comes to arba kaises do we sell your shirt. Or for Hanukkah, we say sell your shirt or go collect money to pay. If you pay other mitzvahs, if you can't afford it, then you're not chayiv to go ahead and do anything more than that. However, when it comes to a leisus, that says in interpretation above, you have to spend all the money in the world you have to avoid being over a leisus. Some of the achreim ask, it says in the Psuvas, koifen achetei nafshe, we force you to do a mitzvah say, and we will kill you. So what do you mean you don't have to spend a third of your money for it? They say that's talking about where you are defiant. You refuse to do the mitzvah. Here we're talking about a case where you want to do the mitzvah but just can't afford it. Ellis, what do you mean a third? Elam say the hidden mitzvah actually when it comes to a hidden mitzvah up to a third of the mitzvah. What do you mean? So Rashi learns that a third means if you found 2 sefer Torah to buy. So Rashi, by the way, holds a mitzvah. You fulfill the mitzvah of writing sefer Torah just by buying a sefer Torah. And let's say one sefer Torah is a third nicer ksav, better parchment than the other sefer Torah. Up to a third more, you should pay for the more expensive sefer Torah because it's zeh keli va'anvei. As we had in Moshe Shabbos, Daf Kufel and Gil Beis, a few examples, tzitzis and lulav, and the Gemara Rashi here says we don't have that in Moshe Shabbos, Daf Kufel and Gimel. Here Rashi says talis no and tzitzis no, and people wonder what do you mean by talis no? The main mitzvah of talis are the tzitzis. So you have nice woolen tzitzis, whatever it is. What do you mean by talis no? What does it actually mean? Anyway, but Amashi, shlish magav shlish labar. It's a famous thing in the Gemara always. When we say a third, let's say it costs $6. A third means $2 worth, because a third within, or is a third from outside. It means if you add whatever the third, it's a third of the add, whatever you add onto it. So if let's say 6, you add half of 6 is 3, you add it on, comes 9, then it's a third of 9. You add it on a third of the outside. It's mugab, the outside. Teiku. Now, Rabbi, I said, up to a third is your own. And actually, up to a third, you have an obligation. The Eibush doesn't pay you back in this world. On the Kanda spending more than a third for hidden mitzvah, the Eibush will pay you in this world. Some of the Shayim say, the Muki Yosef, the Chananel, I guess it's a bit more foolish, where he says it means that you're mechuyev mutzadich to pay for up to a third hidden mitzvah, even though you can't afford it. Beyond the third, only if the Eibush gave you the money, the Eibush gave you the money easy, then either according to the Mukiyasi, you have a chiv, according to the Mechanal, you're allowed to spend more than a third. But less than a third, chayecha kaidmin. That I'm sorry, but if you more than a third, if you can't afford it, you're not mechuyev at all. Others disagree. They say even less than a third, you cannot afford it, you're not mechuyev to spend for hidden mitzvah. Anyway. The Rameh, interesting, the Ruchiyah brings the Rameh. The Rameh says that if you are earning more than what you need to bear substance, that is as if it's a gift from Hashem and you can feel it. And therefore, that's called Mishal Kosh Baruch Hu, and you have to use the money to spend for Hidden Mitzvah, even though it's a lot more than a third, than the third of the original. For example, you find 2 Sefer Torah, even though the second one, 2 Seragim, even though the second Esrog is worth a lot more than the first Esrog, more than a third, you should pay for it. Mishnah. Kosher Chatim is anything which I'm obligated to keep. To guard. This way. I prepared the nezik, that means I didn't take care of it properly. And what do you call it? Or this means that I have to pay for this nezik. What about sometimes I was only partially responsible. I was a bit negligent. then chapti b'tashlumin this guy. I still have to pay for the entire hezek, as the Gemara will explain that on. Kehechshe kol this as if I what? As if I prepared the entire hezek. When do you pay? Only nechasim she'ein behemila. There's no aver of stealing. Those does not belong to hekesh. Otherwise, we live before already. Shoy de ehu. According to the halacha, the Rabban hold that shoy de ehu v'lo shoy shel hekesh. Nechasim she'ein shel beneblis. Nechasim that belong to Yidden, but not if it belongs to a goy. Nechasim hamiyuchadim. Nechasim that have owners. But if it has no owners, you're part we'll see more later what that means. Ubechol makom, in every place, if your animal causes damage, you're obligated, liable. Chutz mishus hamiched. If your animal wandered into the property of the mazik, and then you got beaten by the animal, gored by the animal of the mazik, then the mazik is part of your animal, has no right to be there. But if shus hanizim, they have a joint shus. We'll explain later. The partners, what happens then? Kishehizik chav hamazik. When you cause damage, the mazik is liable. The shalom tashlume nezik has to pay the payments. The meitav, the best of his land. And this is what we learned before. We're talking about either Lego or Kenan. It wasn't the first mission of these words, even though it's the exact same words. It's this mission that is redundant. So what we learned. If I'm responsible for shot, in this guy, I'm as if I prepared the nezek. Let's say you have a cow, or you have a pit. You gave it over to somebody who is not capable of minding it, somebody deaf and dumb, or a fool, or a minor. And it caused damage. You are responsible. But if you gave them a fire, you're not responsible. So we're going to try to understand what kind of a case is it that for fire you're not responsible, but for your cow and the pit you are. Your mother says, right, there's two possibilities. One is where the cow was secured and the boiler was covered, and the age, I guess, was not really, was the fire was not revealed. That's one possibility. And then we have to understand why here you are obligated. The cow was tied down. The other way is that the cow so why the fire was open flame, you gave it to them, you're not responsible. It's different. So, Mike, what are we talking about? The cow was tied up and the bone was covered. Think about it could be a similar case by a fire. The fire is not, you're not liable because the fire wasn't exposed. So why? He was quite responsible. He was a tied up animal. Ella b'sharmut, must be talking about a shirt which is untied. Uboy megula, the pit which is uncovered. The kavos gabe eish. What would be similar by a fire? Shall let us an open flame. So why would you potter a fire? Mashen gabe eish the potter. Why are you potter? What is shlok? Shlok says Mashen chizk. Shlok himself says name chizk. When are you exonerated? Loishanu ela shemos like a cheles. V'libi gave him a piece of coal and he blew it, and to make the fire bigger. However. Abel shall have it, but the game an open flame. Of course, it's reckless. My time of why the body is naked, definitely you're guaranteed a damage will be caused. So was a lo'ilam b'shar kosher. One answer is, we're talking about the akshar was tied up and the body was covered, and the aish was only a coat. So the aish is part we understand. So why you? The Kami has a question. What's the difference? A shor generally will rip the rope apart, and if he should have anticipated that, so therefore it's negligence on your part to give it to a what do you call it, a chesher cotton, and boy dark it's common for the cover to open up on its own. So therefore again, it's easy to open up. Of the gachelis by a coal, kamo the shor, leave it alone. You don't blow on it, the fire fades. It fades and it disappears itself. That's why for fire you're not liable, but for everything else you are liable. It says you want further. So Teishrei doesn't like. He's not so happy with Rashi because if the pshat is that we know that a boy, if you tackle left it covered, you're not really liable. So what's the problem here? And so why taka are you chayiv if you kept it covered? You have the chesed cotton. The pshat is like giving a chesed cotton is worse than just covering it, because maybe they'll play around with it, they'll open it up. But a coal, since if the coal doesn't, if the guy doesn't really do much with it, if the fire just disappears on it keeps on disappearing and disappearing, eventually disappears completely. So therefore, maybe you're a potter. So anyway, further, the game of flame, you're also pot. According to Rabbi Yechanan, Because why? And why you put susi? Because the Cherry has to take the fire and move it somewhere else. By the Cherry wanders on its own. The boy people come to the boy, they fall in. So the language here, the Cherry is actually doing the damage. They're the one taking the fire. Even though it's an exposed flame, okay, it was the wrong thing to do. But in the other, we cannot charge you because the Cher is the one who brought the fire to wherever it went. Because so L'chayde, if it's over the flame, you put it. The Kabbalah Hacha, the Cherry, moved to the boy Megula. So the shirt is untied, the bar is open. Is Maishna Hocha, again, what's the difference? So we answer. Hossam Tzafsa the Chedesh. There, the Chedesh is the one who takes the fire and brings it over to wherever it has to be brought over to. Hocha Leit Tzafsa the Chedesh Kagon. Here, the Chedesh doesn't have really any input. The shirt itself is untied, and you ask the Chedesh to watch, and the shirt goes on its own. The boy, you ask the Chedesh to watch, and somebody comes to the boy and falls in. So the Chedesh didn't contribute at all. What about me learned? There's a chumrah that you find, a stringency you find by shur, you don't find by pit. And you find the stringency by boy, you don't find by shur. What's the stringency by shur? If a shur kills a person, they have to pay compensation. And the shur kills an eved, you have to pay the $30 knas. Nigmar dina, if a shur killed a person and was found guilty in a bezin, from that moment onward, you can't have any benefit whatsoever because as Baal Hashar Noki, and the owner now is completely cleansed from his property, his asset, and it's common for a shur, like a goring here that goes out and causes damage. But on the other hand, a boy, we know shur the person who the boy, you talk to exempt, you don't have to pay anything for it, and you don't pay for the eved, you don't pay shleishim, and the boy does not go out to cause damage. On the controversy, what's the chumrah in boy of a shur? The moment you place it there as a stumbling block, it's already there to cause damage. So from the very beginning, you pay the full amount of the damages. By shur, the first 3 times you are a tam, and you only pay half. Then we're going to contrast now a shur with Aish and Aish and Boy. What's the stringency of shur over Aish? There is a stringency in fire over shur. Same thing. So shur pays kaifer, pays for the, if he kills an eved, you pay $30. Nigmadinas v'no, if you kill a person, it's asbano. Masroi lecheresh shayt. We add another one which you said before. If you gave it over to a cheresh shayt to guard for safekeeping, chayiv. Mashengi by fire. But we said before, by fire you're exempt. We explained the conservation of Shlakish, what we're talking about. But what's the stringency of fire over a shoy? The very first time you pay the full compensation. The first 3 times you only pay half. What's the chumrah of fire over bird? And the chumrah of bird over Eish. What's the chumrah of bird by Eish? By the chumrah, remember, by bird we have a few exceptions. Shoy v'la adam. And Chamoy will like it. And Chamoy, now why by Aish? Aren't you, we said on top of the page, by Aish, you're not chayiv if you kill a person, why not? Because we have a rule, come limit in Abane. If you lit a fire, you killed somebody, and then if you killed somebody, well, the guy should have ran away. But if he was tied down, he couldn't run away, then you're chayiv misa, and the din is coming up, and you don't have to pay the money. So therefore, Aish, you don't have a case of paying damage. The person could run away, you don't pay. If he couldn't, if he was tied down, then you're guilty and you'll be charged with murder. So you don't have to pay. So, but by bird also you don't pay for killing a person. But by bird also says sure, you don't pay for came when they fall down into the bird. And we'll see a big machlek Rashi. Rashi holds that you put it from kalim. That's it. But let's say wheat falls down there in the back of a donkey, you pay for it. And Taisa holds anything which is not a living thing, you don't pay for. Anyway, so that why I bring it now. What's the cool of by Aish? By Aish, you have a leniency that if it's taman, if we had this before anymore, if it's taman, if it's hidden, not exposed, it has to be exposed. If it's not exposed, you are potter from it. It's buried under the ground. So by Aish, says by a boy from the very beginning, from the outset, it's causing damage. Fire doesn't. Most for a boy, you chayiv not by fire. What's the stringency of Eish or Barsha? Eish darker leilach lahazik. Eish goes out there and causes damage. The Eish is responsible for everything. It doesn't matter what it burns down. Ben davar rola, whether it's suitable, ben davar she'eno, not suitable. For example, kalim, it doesn't really meant to burn kalim, but it'd be responsible if it burned kalim and broke it. But a boyer is part of a kalim. Hashem gave a boyer. Hashem gave a boyer. So, for example, if the animal gored or kicked kalim, you're chayiv. Sorry, let's keep going. Sorry. Thinking about releasing. So why don't we mention as well? Why don't we say chaymed b'shem boy? Just like you just mentioned now about kalim, about Eish chayiv. Say the same thing about shir. If a shir goes and kicks kalim, you're chayiv. But if it falls in the boy, you're potter. Shashar chayiv boy is a kalim b'shem a boy. Says the Gemara, if the animal goes ahead and gores into the kalim, or gives it a good kick, so which is what do you call it? He is chayiv, but when it comes to fire, since it's not suitable to burn kalim as well, because it's not normal to use kalim, you'd be potter. So the Gemara, Shashoy Chai, but Shashoy Chai kalim, I shouldn't give a boy is I just skipped the line. Yeah. But at least why don't we say the strictness by shir of a boy? Shashoy Chai, but Shashoy Chai bekalim, I shouldn't give a boy is pot mekalim. So we answer Hom Mani Rabbi Yehudi. This follows Rabbi Yehuda. The Mechayev on this Kekelim. Rabbi Yehuda, we already looked at the Gemara before. Rav Hey, Rabbi Yehuda holds that Yechayev also for Kalim. So there's a stringency of Shoyd over Boyd. That's just Shoyd if he breaks Kalim Yechayev, and by Boyd of Kalim you potter because he holds the din as the same. Says when you hear Rabbi Yehuda in Mesefer, it says Chaim Beisha Boyd. What's the chumra of a fire of Boyd? Because Eish Yechayev. For you potter if it's Talmud hidden and boy you're chayiv. Shei daglel hazing mulech big dover big dover shelo eish is chayiv even something that's suitable like kalim. Mashen give a boy. The boy is only dover harola. What is it? Eitzim wood. Dover she'ein rola my new kalim. For example, kalim you are not chayiv for in a boy. Kalim chayiv in a boy. Mashen give a boy. So what was the problem? Because if Rabbi Yehudi, Rabbi Yehuda holds clearly that Rabbi Yehuda is Kalim, but he holds clearly that Yechayev for Kalim and a boy. How can you say in the Sefer that this chumra is that they have the agent of a boy? About boy, you're not Chayev for Kalim and Eish you are, and Feidish you are Chayev by boy, Rabbi Yehuda. Says Gemara, we're talking about Rabbani. Really, it's Rabbanon. If it's the Rabbanon, so why don't he mention there's a Chumra and Shoyd over both? That Shoyd is Chayiv and Kalim, and Boyd is Potter from Kalim. The Talmud Shai, he admits other things as well. My Shaya, the High Shai. What else was admitted? Shaya Talmud. He also admitted by fire. Fire that what? That fire you are Potter, that if it's hidden you are Potter, and Boyd has a Chumra over that. So it doesn't exhaust all the stringencies. Or you boys say, well, let him be real, it's Rabbi Yehuda. And Rashi is interesting when he says Shayir Tomon. He could have said there's a chumra in Shoyer over Eish. That what is that if a Shoyer and Boyer, that if a Shoyer gives a kick, let's say something which is hidden that's in a sack, you're chayiv. And by fire, if it's hidden, you're potter. But Rashi then says Boyer. What's an example of Boyer? He says here that what happens if a donkey has in his sack tavua and falls in the bar, you are chayiv. And Taisa disagrees. Taisa, if you're in a sack, you have hidden that tavua, just like it says, Shari will Kale doesn't mean vessels, Kale means anything that's not a living thing. And Yitaka would be potter as well. And yes, the Gemara, La'ilam, Rabbi Yehudi, really it's Rabbi Yehudi. If it's Rabbi Yehuda, we said before the Chayr of Yehuda holds that Taman is chayiv. So what's this stringency here? The dover she'ein rola. What do you mean when we say that fire is chayiv, even things which are not suitable, but boy is not? And you said the Chayr according to Rabbi Yehuda, boy is chayiv also for things that are not suitable. For example, kalim. Lav lasuya kalim doesn't mean to come and tell you that fire is chayiv if it burns kalim, masha'en kalim b'boy, but also chayiv in kalim. Lasuya lichka nida b'sich chavona. If it licks over there the plowshares, or it blackens the stones, which is not really a normal thing for fire. So for fire, it's not a normal thing for fire, and you are still chayiv on that. So the Gemara. And that's what we're talking about over here. and Mashengi my bird. Why is bird any different? So Rashi learns because it's stationary. So the bird can't go over to the rocks and ruin the rocks. By Aishir Chayiv, if he even licks the rocks, ruins the rocks. But bird is not Chayiv. Why not? Not because halachically he can't do it. In the Mitzvah he can't do it. Practically, how does a bird step up and go and do this because of this damage? Says the Gemara further. So why don't you mention something else as well? What is that? Maskalavashi, at least why don't you mention Chayim b'Shoyim b'Boy? There's a Chumra and Shoyim of a bird. Shahashoyim Chayiv Boy Shoyim Psul Mikdashin. We know that, let's say, if there's a psul, a carbon that was possible, so we redeem this carbon, and now this carbon, there's a very strong limitation as to what you can actually do with this carbon, and that is, you cannot share the wool, you cannot go ahead and drink the milk, and if, let's say, our shoy, what do you call it, damages the shoy psul mikdashin, you're chayit, because it's no longer considered hegdish shoy, it's considered your shoy. And then by saying it by a bird, if shoy psul mikdashin falls in the bird, you're potter. Now, why are you potter? It belongs to a private person. Now, why are you potter? Because it says in the pasuk b'hameis yelod, you end up keeping the carcass. But when it comes to a shoy that used to be a carbon psul mikdashin, you cannot end up keeping the carcass, because, like we learned, tizbach or like giza, we learned from the pasuk that you cannot bosav or chalav, that you cannot use it for your own purpose, so you can't say b'hameis yelod. So what you're asking now a question. So why don't we say chayi by shol sumidoshin by shoy chayi, because it's considered shoy de'eyu. Mashen gave a boy potter because he can't say b'hameisi like keep the carcass. So you might eat amrid b'shleim b'rabban. If you can say that the author rabbanon he I did shaynach shaynam habi. Said before there's a number of things missing, so there's also missing. Maybe you could have added psul midoshin. The amrid b'huda my shay the hashay. What did we leave out? So my answers what he left out is. Im dosh benira. If the animal went ahead and plowed, with his plowshares, and he intended, and they do that, so then it's he intended to cause damage. That's kavaros lahazik and his chayiv. He has to pay the money for whatever he ruined. Mashengen, but boy does not move forward, so therefore not shaykh. Says the Gemara, im dosh benira. That's the whole thing that he missed out on. Is dosh benira lav shiguru? That's not called missing out. The Hatana, it says clearly she came dark to leilach lahazik. It says clearly about short dark to leilach. So dark to leilach means he goes to a plowshare. Mashengen a bird doesn't move, and therefore obviously there's no share. He couldn't have mentioned. He couldn't have mentioned it. So we say is the Rabbanon who the author of this Mishnah. Stop here, and good Shabbos. Continue Mishnah later tomorrow.